The Unfiltered by Jade.
Jade. Welcome to The Unfiltered by Jade, where we get out of the box and dive into topics that are sidelined. I look forward to entertain, educate, and inspire. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, donate, and make everybody know about this.
Beats by RB Records.
Shopping assistance, your style, your budget. Our services include online and local shopping for individuals and businesses, personal shopping, purchasing of company and office supplies, importing and exporting small packages across Jamaica and worldwide, and helping you find unique gifts and items for all events and occasions. Contact us at 876-919-5195 or shoppingassistance2015@gmail.com. Shopping Assistance, your style, your budget. Welcome back to The Unfiltered by Jade. Today we have with us Terrencelcoffie, or we call him Professor Coffie, whichever one you want. So he is an adjunct lecturer at New York University, educates Don't Incarcerate Podcast Host, criminal justice advocate, speaker, and consultant. So hello, Terrence.
Hello, Jade, and I want to thank you for having me here today. I want to thank you for this opportunity to share with your listening audience, and it's glad to be here.
Nice, glad to have you. We have some things interesting to speak about. So today we're going to be speaking about transforming our men. And generally, we don't have so many persons speaking about that topic or feeling that we need to talk about men and transformation and how to go about doing that. So you're the perfect person to do so. So I'm glad to have you. So I want you first to tell us about your background and why transformation is a big deal for you.
Well, again, Jade, thank you for having me here.
Mhm.
In regards to my background, I, to be quite frank with you, I grew up in foster homes.
Mhm.
My biological parents, uh, lived the lifestyle that they lived. I've shared in several spaces. My father was a pimp, and my mother was what she was in regards to him.
Okay.
So I grew up that way. I ended up in foster homes at the age of 6, along with two of my siblings, and we were all separated. So I grew up in spaces learning how to survive
Mm.
as a child, emotionally, mentally, and physically. I grew up with the notion during my time in foster care that I would at some point go back home to, my parents, because that's what I traditionally, I mostly saw uh, young men like myself who would come, go into the foster care system, but at some juncture they would go back to their parents and their homes and live happily ever after.
Right.
Um, and I grew up looking at shows like Ripley's Believe It or Not. I probably gave
Mm-hmm.
my age away. Um, and I would be so captivated by the segments of families reuniting after so many years of being
Yes.
separated. And I held to that because in my mind, I kind of built this image that, or this fantasy that, exclude the fact that my parents were drug addicts, exclude the fact that we were living in poverty, exclude the fact that we came from a very challenging space. But because in this fantasy that I would see on these shows, I would see myself going back to my family, and we would be sitting around a fireplace at the log cabin with our Christmas sweaters on, uh, eating s'mores and
Mm.
enjoying marshmallows around the fireplace. That was never my reality, and it
Wow.
became even more stark when I learned that my biological mother had died.
Wow.
So the idea of ever going back to or to this fantasy world uh, was ended at the age of 9,
Mm.
and I was later adopted and in foster care, as I shared earlier. I grew up with the having to have the ability to survive. And I'm a young, I was a young kid, just wanted to be a kid, but, living a very different reality. So I had to learn to fight very early. I had to learn to protect myself very early.
Mm-hmm.
And those experiences shaped me as I grew up. So much so by the time I was 20 years old, I was sent to prison for the first time in life. Um, so when we talk about the importance of transforming
Yes.
our transformation, a lot of times I'm not a very religious person, but there's this scripture in the Bible that says something to the effect that when I thought as a child, I reasoned as a child,
Right. But now as an
and I
adult.
rationalized as a
Mm-hmm.
child. But when I became a man,
Yes,
I
I put
put
away
away
childish
childish
things.
things.
Yes.
And one of the determinations that I've uh, found in my own life and in the lives of so many of the men that I work with throughout the country in various organizations who may find themselves in prison. A lot of times we're still growing up with the mentality of a child because we never had those external experiences that sparks our ability to be mature. We can do mad things. We can have sex. We can have women. We can do all those things. But what I'm talking about is more of a mental, intellectual, and spiritual maturity that has to take place.
Yes.
Um, and for me, and sometimes, unfortunately, what brings us to those spaces are tragic events,
Mm.
unfortunately, and it doesn't,
Yes.
or we have those moments in time that began to shape our futures. And for me, that actually began in two phases. The first was during one of my last incarcerations while in Gainesville Correctional Institution. That on November the 4th, I saw the election of Barack Obama.
Mm.
And for me, being from the South and, being a black man in America, my identity with myself as a black man is really entrenched in one of James Baldwin's books, Fire Next Time.
Mm.
And he shares in this literary work that became a, a space of direction for me. And he writes, and I'm going to read this to your audience, and it is what it is in this literature.
Sure.
Um, he shares that in regards to his nephew's father, your father was defeated long before he died because at the bottom of his heart, he really believed what white people said about him.
Mm. Yes.
You can only be destroyed by believing that you really are what the white world calls a nigger.
Mm. That's powerful. Yeah.
That passage
Yes.
was what I like to refer to as the internalization of a false narrative about one's self.
Mm-hmm.
We adopt a belief system based upon our societal culture, our cultural context, our environmental context, our all these things that shape and tells us who we are. And as I share with you, I grew up in a space where all I saw in the embodiment of a black man that was close to me were men who were living in mediocrity
Right.
within themselves. So, but for a child, as you develop, you begin to grow, you don't really differentiate what is or isn't. What you know is what is.
Right.
And I lived in a what is society. Um, and that was my reality until that night of November 8th, 2008. And in that moment, Jade, I need to tell you that everything that because with those external messages that I received from society, I was also receiving other messages from other places, like my foster mother,
Right.
she would always tell me I was a smart young man. She would say, "Oh my God, you're so intelligent." However, it was hard for me to digest that because what I had grew up with up to that point was a society and people who had told me I was never going to be anything. You're going to
Right.
be just like
Right.
your daddy. You're going to
Right.
be no good. All those things. So that was really the premises of my belief system. So as my adopted mom began to tell me all these other things about me that I could not identify with, I assumed that she was telling me these things just to tell me something to make me feel good because
Mm.
as an African American, is somehow believed that the only thing that we could do is play sports, fight, box, and all these other things. And to be honest and dance. I'm a black man, but I have two left feet. I am not very good at playing any type of sport.
Oh my
Um,
God.
so that left me like really perplexed.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I want to say to you, I pursued all those things. I just was not. It was just was not my forte.
Just not
So
your thing.
yeah, it was just not. I was just done. But there were other people who were like me that were doing other things that I could identify with. And again, not to get lost in that, on that night that Barack Obama was elected, it redefined and challenged everything I ever believed about myself as a
Yes.
black man and black
Yes.
men in this country as
Yes.
a whole. From a historical perspective, I'm not talking about in 2008. I'm
Yes.
talking about generations of black men who were subjugated to slavery, black men who
Mm-hmm.
were subjugated to demoralization based upon their race, black men who were subjugated to a second-class citizenship in a country in which the hypocrisy said that all men were created equal.
Mm.
We were referred to as niggers. We were
Yeah.
lynched.
Mm-hmm.
We were degraded in front of our families and our wives and our women. So that's the generation, from a historical perspective. When we talk about redefining and transforming ourselves, it's more than just what we see in the modern scope of things. And this is why when I teach things from a historical lens, because what we have is something that's called generational poverty
Mm.
that is passed on. And generational poverty isn't solely based in economics, although
Right.
that's another critical aspect. Generational poverty also deals with the way we perceive ourselves in life.
Yes. Yes.
We're poverty stricken on identity. We're
Yes.
poverty stricken on identity in a space and time that tells us we're less than, we can't achieve, we can't be this, we can't, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that belief system is passed on from one generation to the next.
Mm.
So let's clarify that. And I think that I don't think the second, that was the first, and the second critical point that was transformational for me after the witnessing that historic moment in time was when I decided with a bright idea that I wanted to do something different with my life based upon what I had saw. I began to believe that I could be more.
Yes.
And that belief system led me to enroll in college.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I need to say that when I initially did all of this, it was solely out of fear of going back to prison and reliving or living in the mediocrity that I had determined that I had been living in up to that point.
Right.
When I saw I will always go back to the night of Barack's, the former President
Inauguration.
Barack
Mm-hmm.
Obama's election, because what most people don't know, that was the critical turning point for me. And I think lastly, during the second part that reiterated that, as I shared with you, I was facing a 30-year sentence.
Mm.
After seeing that historic election, found myself in a situation, and I remember being arrested for the charge I was under that carried the salacious time. I knew that my involvement in this conspiracy and all this stuff I was really not, in it, but I was in it. And
Right.
my mother's voice, my adopted mama's voice came to my head. And I remember she used to always tell me, Terrence, one day you're going to get yourself in some mess you can't get out of.
Mm.
Um, and up to that point, I had gotten out of beating the drug charges and all that
All
stuff.
of them. Mm-hmm.
All of them, and a lot of people sometimes, men particularly, we think we're escaping something, but I've come to understand that was really God's grace, really
Yes.
trying to give us a way out,
Yes. Yes.
But when you misperceive or you misread those moments,
Mm.
you may find yourself in a situation you just can't get out of. And
Yes.
unfortunately, some people pay the ultimate price for that. And you will always hear the families say that, yeah, he was trying to do this at one point, except that was the grace of God. That
Yes.
was God's grace through
That
all
was
those
God's.
points.
Yeah.
And I also want to remind your audience again, I'm not a religious man by a long shot.
Oh, well, you sound very religious,
Yeah, I'm not. I'm spiritual.
and that's fine. I'm religious myself, so that's fine. I'm good.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in that moment, when I went back to that cell, that I found myself falling to my knees and praying to the God of my adopted mama, and asking him, really, my Jade, that what I was really praying and asking this God was not to allow them to give me that much time. I knew I
Mm.
was going to go to prison, but don't give me that much time, because now, I'm doing the math now. I was 39 at the time, and you add 30 years on that. So we're talking about a man who will be getting out of prison by the time he was 70.
So
So
you
what
were
that
bargaining.
meant,
Mm-hmm.
as I sat there and began to contemplate my life, in that moment, I realized that reality, that I had wasted
Mm.
my entire life.
Yes.
And it would be 2 weeks later that they would call me, and through that, I attribute this moment to that prayer, that they called me and told me that the charges against me were dropped.
Marty. And that was God again.
And that was God
That was
again.
God. Mm-hmm.
And that moment set me on a mission that would lead me to uh, seeking the best version of myself. And
Yes.
I was encouraged to get involved with academics. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I had gotten involved with the program here in New York, where I'm 39. Well, I was going on 40 at that time, and in my mind, I figured, I'm 40 years old. My life is where it is right now. So the best I could do is try to help other young men who were
Mm-hmm.
coming after me, who may have thought or felt that the lifestyle that I may have been known for was, a life of, I don't know, luck. I don't know what the hell people perceive. If you're not living in it and you don't understand that most people are in it because they're trying to survive life, you'll you'll
Mm-hmm.
you'll you'll, you'll misread it and
Yes.
glamorize something that you really don't understand.
Yes.
And that's what most people don't get. I see a lot of these young guys today, and I ran with Cass, and I'm a part, involved with people that we didn't do what we did for no glory or all that. It was surviving. Um,
Mm.
so I felt that I could use my life to assist other young men in that capacity,
Yes.
to kind of divert them from some of the mistakes I made. And someone encouraged me, maybe I should be a counselor. So I went to the community college and I just signed up, to think I can go probably be a counselor. And they had me take a college placement test. And again, I have to take you back to the old lady who would tell me I was so smart and all these things. I took the placement tests and I did so well on it that they wanted to put me in a special college program that connected me with New York University. And for 4 years of my life, my academic and professional career began to blossom from there.
Nice. Nice. And you're doing well.
Yes, thank you.
I like how you reinforce the whole positive affirmation stays with you.
Yes,
So it's important that people affirm positively in children's life because that's what they remember. I mean, they remember the negatives, but throughout everything, the positive affirmation will stay. It will stay. I want you to tell us, after incarceration, can someone have a fulfilling life? I mean, you said after you came out, you started academic success and whatever, but for others who probably have been and stayed their time in, when they come out, can they have a fulfilling life?
yes. And I don't, and I say that to any of your listeners who may hear this. I don't say that like I tell where I'm from. I don't say that from across the street or across the lake. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that as that person who swam across the lake.
Mm.
I'm that person who believes that the universe provides every individual with the potential to succeed.
Right.
Um, However, I do understand the complexities and barriers that could prevent a person from executing that. I don't take that away, and that can be from that can be various policies that are implemented. That can be social constructs or barriers that impede upon an individual's ability to succeed. However, I have to put that however.
However, mhm.
However, for any person that hears this, the determination to succeed has to be just as important to any individual as taking their next breath.
Mm.
When you reach that point of your life, a person reaches that point of their life, uh, I believe that there's no barrier or mountain, as they say, high enough to stop an individual or limit an individual's ability to succeed. I believe that shows such as this uh, become reaffirmations
Right.
to those men and women because again, the reason I can say that uh, my catalyst moment was the night I saw Barack Obama
Right.
elected. Had I not seen that, had he not won that election, it probably would have said to me, see, black men ain't nothing. You can never
Mm-hmm.
be that. That's what
Mm-hmm.
it would have affirmed to me. And that's just is what it is. But
Mm-hmm.
by seeing that and by providing spaces like this that individuals are able to hear themselves in my voice of my life, I believe that it serves as an opportunity to build upon a belief system and rewrite a narrative about any individual that will provide them the necessary support mentally and psychologically to move on and transition to a successful life. Oh yes, I believe that with my whole heart.
Okay. Okay. So we can persons can't just come out and expect to for things to fall in their laps. They have to go after what they want.
Yeah, you can never. We never. And for any of my guys who listening, who may be incarcerated, who hear this or who may be on, now in society or free on the streets, as they say. We know that's not to be a fact for the street life. You have to grind for what you want. It's just like, I'm a big fan of Jay-Z. The grind is real. We just changing the aim.
Yes.
Contrary to popular belief, and some segments of curriculum that says we have to teach our men resilience and all these other attributes. I think that our people are probably some of the most resilient men and women that are on the planet Earth.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'll say that from a historical perspective. We're not even going to talk about the civil rights movement. We're not even going to talk about the degradation of where we've transitioned from as a people. And also, I want to reaffirm in this conversation that where we're at today in our society, although I know this is surrounding men and women or men who may be incarcerated, I think it's good for our society to understand that what we see through our criminal justice system is only a continuation of a conversation that began with Dr. Martin Luther King when it was asked, "Am I a man?" So this doesn't just start in this space of where we're at. Again, we cannot look at where we're at as it just happened in the moment. This is a continuation,
yes,
of
yes,
a movement for people as in the veins of human rights, race relations in this country, as we've just seen with the voting right act of John Lewis, which was shot down, that didn't make passage in Congress a week or so ago, is still the same language. Trust me, it's still the same language. It's still the fight for social equity and racial justice.
yes,
It's still the fight for equality and inclusiveness in the structure of what happens in our democratic society. So
right.
whether some of our men and women, whether they're incarcerated, the fact that they're Black, the fact that they, when we talk about microaggressions in 2022, we talk about the Proud Boys, offshoot of the Ku Klux Klan. When we talk about the fact that we're still saying our first African American governor or our first, that's indicative.
Yeah, I agree.
That's very indicative of the fact that we're still fighting for a place in this society.
Yes, we
And
are.
for some, that struggle continues. And for a great majority, even those of us who have been successful, we are still in that space of being identified as Americans. And I'll say that no matter what some people may or may not believe, Mitch McConnell recently in a I guess a statement made this distinction between Americans and African Americans when we were just simply talking about voters. So that should be a clear indicator to society that there is a system of thought that continues to impede on the identity of who we are as a people. And I know that was a lot, but I think
No. I mean, that's great information. Great information. We're going into some deep stuff there. What are some of the ways in which a Black man can transform himself when he gets out of prison?
Well, one of the first things I want to say that identity of transforming himself does not begin when he gets out of prison.
Wow.
That is something that begins while he's in the moment where his feet are at now. And that was one of the identifying markers that I had to determine for myself
Mm-hmm.
while incarcerated, when I had that reflective moment to look at my own life and ask myself, is this all I wanted? When I looked around at the cells and I'm looking at a screen of, and I have to go back to that night because
Mm-hmm.
that's when it happened. Because I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at this man and I'm looking at um, people, our elders who looked upon his election crying. And there was one particular lady that reminded me of my mother crying because she understood what that moment meant. And for
Yes.
me, it was sitting in a dingy prison cell that I looked around at what my life had become
Mm.
after the internalization of what white America has told me I was. I learned in that night that it was a lie.
Was a lie.
I believe, you know how they say we believe the great lie. I believe the great
The
lie.
great lie. Yeah.
And it was in that moment that I began to reanalyze who I was and what that led me to for any of those men and women. It's almost that where we began at is start building a spiritual foundation, whatever that means to any individual. I don't promote any particular religion, but whatever means that provides you an opportunity to connect with a higher source of thought and
Mm-hmm.
vision of yourself is one way that begins. The second way is to begin to engage um, ourselves in literature and that begins to redefine who we are from, and we begin to understand who we are from a different lens.
Mm-hmm.
I found myself after uh, the election. I remember getting up the next day, and Jade, I need to tell you, I felt like I was in I don't know what world. You know how you feel like you've been
Right.
transferred to
Mm-hmm.
another
Transfer.
world
Mm-hmm.
where nothing is the same anymore. No matter what
Right.
I believed 24 hours ago, it was all gone out the window now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I found myself in this space of this identity of being in a country for 400 years that people said they made jokes about black men becoming the president. We had the civil rights movement, we had slavery, we had the Emancipation Proclamation, we had the civil rights movement, we had the so-called war on drugs, we had thug life, we had it all.
Mm.
And in that moment, um, that next day was very, very different. I walked around with a sense of pride as a black man because of what another black man had achieved.
Nice.
Yo, that thing
Nice.
was so deep. Jay-Z and
Nice.
what's his name? I can't remember the other performer. They made a song called "My President Is Black." That was a celebration of
Yes.
Black America.
Yes. Yes.
Jay-Z and Jeezy. My president is black. That was a proclamation of being proud.
Yes. It's
And
like you found your identity.
yes, it was
Yes.
actually an embracement.
Yes.
It was probably one of the embracing moments of something wholesome and good for us as a people. So in that moment, I began to embrace that part of myself. So in that embracement of that positive energy, I wanted to start reading other things other than Iceberg Slim. I'm being honest with you. I wanted to start reading about James Baldwin.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to learn about W.E.B. Du Bois.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to see myself in the lived experiences and from a different perspective than I had been conditioned to believe that only
Mm-hmm.
existed for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I really encourage men and women who may hear this to that transformation will begin where you are at. And it's going to be, it comes with a reflection on looking at where we are, where you're at in the moment. And then it becomes a place of embracing something or someone that shows you a positive outlook on yourself. And then that next step comes into indoctrinating yourself with some other beliefs and narratives about who we are. And that also will require our men and women who are incarcerated to begin connecting with other people and organizations outside of the prisons while they're there. Now, as they transition out of prisons, we have to continue the journey.
Yes.
And continuing that journey for me is getting involved with those organizations upon release and learning and beginning to shape the best version of yourself.
Yes.
And to engage. Me personally, I'm big on academics. I understand that education is the great equilibrium. I believe that, as Malcolm X shared, education is the key to tomorrow's future for those who prepare for it today. I believe that wholly, because what education does, it provides us with intellectual knowledge that allows us to navigate a societal structure in which we've kind of existed blindly. Education and intellect provides you with the ability to now see the board, to know how to move, to know where to move, and how to engage. So I will stop there because that goes into one of my
listen, you have allowed
areas.
Listen, you throw out all of my questions already, and I'm happy about that. I have no problem with that because you answered everything. You answered everything, and you just threw me off course, and I'm good with it. I'm good with it so far. So what I've summed up is, first of all, persons need to change their thought process while they're incarcerated. And then when you change your thought process, you read. That's educating yourself about different things now, other things, because your thought process is now being changed. You're doing some introspection. Now you're trying to get to understand who you are, so that when you go back into society, you can hold your head up high despite the fact that you have been incarcerated, and you can now start transforming your life and start connecting with others and ensure that you have education, because education is key.
Is key.
See, I'm a great student, sir.
Yes, you are. You're my top student.
I know you had touched on the demographic of men and how they're treated when they come out. I want you to just, I mean, we're gonna wrap up shortly, but I want you to tell us, how is it that we can change that narrative?
Well, I think that the narrative is being changed now in broadcasts such as this. Again, you have to remember, and society has to remember, and particularly our communities have to remember, there has been a narrative that has filtered the airwaves for over 400 years.
Mighty.
There has been a narrative in each space of history. After the Emancipation Proclamation, the freeing of slaves, they set out to write a narrative through a movie or a documentary called Birth of a Nation, where it characterized African Americans as lazy, no good, want to rape all your white women.
Well,
the next narrative came during the Reconstruction era, when blacks began to build their own, that they refer to us as thieveries, et cetera, all these characterizations of us as a people. It happened during the civil rights movement. You know, most of us don't know what it is to walk up to a whites only, black only water fountain.
No, you don't.
We don't know that. We don't know that narrative.
Nope.
which said you were not good enough. You are not good enough to drink from this fountain. You
Wow.
have to go through the back. Those were subliminal messages. You
Yes,
are
they
not
were.
good enough. You are a second-class citizen. So this is why I say, although we're talking about in modern context, we have to understand the historical narrative.
It's coming from way back.
And that narrative continues today, where you can only live in, certain communities,
Oh yeah.
or you can only go so high in your professional career, or you can only be, and we can go with the onlys. We can do that. So I think that how that we begin to rewrite the narrative will be through a continuation of conversations such as this with men and women from a spectrum of our Black communities. And not only men who with justice involvement, which, I mean, that is important. It's one of the bedrocks on what I believe in, that those closest to the problem, also those closest to the solution. However, yes, Barack Obama never had been to prison, and he impacted my life. I needed to be able to see another variation of myself in America as a Black man to help me redefine for myself who I was as a Black man and my ability to achieve and succeed in life. So I think that how we do this and how we continue to do this is first understanding that we are 400 years behind. We have to truly understand that what we're seeing in America and what they call underrepresented and undeserved communities is simply an internalization of the white man's truth, that you'll never be nothing but a nigga. You ain't gonna never be another thug. This is all you can be. This is all you. And some people have internalized that. You tell us a lie long enough, soon enough, somebody gonna believe. They're gonna believe. You tell a lie long enough. So they done told a lie for 400 years. So I do not know why sometimes we, as a country, we're so perplexed on the outcomes we see that still somehow impedes and impact Black and brown communities. Does it excuse it? No. The responsibility, I think, now lies, as Dr. Du Bois shared in The Souls of Black Folk, is what you're doing right now, Jade, when he talked about the talented 10th. Those of us who have made it out have a responsibility.
Yes.
And he even acknowledged during his time, we have a responsibility to reach back.
Yes.
And assist that 90%.
Yes.
So for me to be here with you today is my personal responsibility.
Yes.
Not only to men and women who are transitioning out of prisons and correctional institutions from across the country, but also to those young men and women who still on the corner, because my name was also Terry Black at one time. I'm that dude for real. I mean, for real. That responsibility goes to those young Black and brown students who may be starting at community colleges and want to make something of themselves. That responsibility extends to, I told you, I'm on a spectrum. God got me on this spectrum of life. To my Black and brown people of color and BIPOCs across this country at Ivy League schools, where we're sometimes only a handful. And how do we navigate a space in which sometimes we're the only Black face in the space?
Wow.
Because I'm also that student who found himself in a room of 200 white students.
Wow.
And the only Black face is something, you get the microaggressions that, he must be here for affirmative action, but you must have got here special. So there are more challenges. Or our Black men and women who may be in corporate America who have to navigate through the cultural constructs of corporate America. being one of the fews, or to someone like Miss Jade, who I'm on this podcast with today, who's using her expertise in a space crowded by so many voices. How does she determine that the work that she's doing is creating change in the lives of communities that have been historically impacted by discrimination, oppression, which has now been manifested in something we call the criminal justice system. And now, so it's that. So I would have to say to Jay, you have to keep doing this, my sister.
Yeah.
You have to continue to know that you, myself, and so many others, we're only those individuals who are the carriers of the flame, the torch has been passed to us.
Yes. Yeah.
To continue the fight for equity, equality, and dare to ask the question, am I a man?
Man.
I'll stop there.
No, you gave me a lot to think about while I'm here. I'm very sure you have given our listeners a lot to think about. And for those persons who don't want to open up and speak and be vulnerable about their situation and where they're at now, I mean, it's time for them to do so. You can't help persons by being quiet. I want to know, Mr. Coffie, how is it that we can reach you?
Okay. For your listeners, I can be reached at Terrencelcoffie, Terrencecoffie, Coffie at Gmail. You can also find me on Educate, Don't Incarcerate on YouTube.
Okay.
Also, you can find me on my new show, It's Coffie Time, on Spotify. We're building our new audience to carry this message, and it's where we talk about power, politics, and the criminal justice system. We like to highlight more than just the issues related to the criminal justice system, but also to racial and social equity and equality, and what that means for us today as a country.
Right.
And discuss some of those pertinent issues. So I look forward to you and your audience joining in and listening to me rant on.
Oh, I've already listened. I've already listened.
Thank you.
Yes. I took my time and I listened to the videos on YouTube. I did.
Thank you.
Yes. So thank you again so much, Terrence. We really appreciate it. You have given us a mouthful. You have given us something that we now need to introspect and to now do our own looking, our own research, our own finding out knowledge about things so that we can be better. Not only for ourselves, but the society. As I say, we're 400 years behind, but it's not too late to try and make a change, even if it's one person at a time.
Exactly.
Even if it's one person at a time. So thank you again so much. And thank you, listeners, for listening to The Unfiltered by Jade. And we'll be back next week, Tuesday. Thank you. Bam, bam, bide. Bam, bam, bide. Bam, bam, bide. Bam, bam, bide.